Hello there, and welcome to the very first live stream of 2025, rebranded slightly to call Freeformers Unplugged. Why? Because we're just going to have unfiltered, unplanned conversation. We are changing it up. We're going to bring our thoughts that we generally keep behind closed doors, and we're going to bring them live. And we are thoroughbred live streamers here at Freeformers, myself and Emily, because we don't plan. This isn't a webinar. We're not expecting anyone to interact as if it's a webinar. You're not expected to just sit there and listen either. So if you are watching live, get in chat. Let us know where you're dialing in from and what you think about some of the spicy opinions, because that's what I promised in 2025, spicy opinions. Let us know what you think of those. So if you're joining us live, welcome. And like I say, we're changing the format up in 2025. And I'm delighted that I finally, after the whole of 2024, convinced Emily to join me on a live stream on a weekly basis. So without further ado, here is my partner in crime, Emily. Hello.
I feel like you're kind of doing me a disservice here. You finally convinced me. Like, you only just asked me to do it
Yeah.
weekly with
Oh,
you.
you come on. I think
You
you've
said it was
always
unfiltered here.
unfiltered. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm not finally convinced. I finally asked you to be on live streams because like I remember we had a conversation after we took some photos with Chloe Ambrose, and we had a really good conversation about L&D on the way back to the car park. And I was like, actually, this is good stuff because you challenge me and I challenge you, and we meet somewhere in the middle. And the worst thing to do is put Toby unplugged and let him just go off on one. I need the balance in my life, which is you.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Because originally the title of this one was very, very different. We weren't going to talk about anything to do with DEI, but the fact that there's been some Zuckerberg keeps dropping these bombshells every now and again. So I imagine he's probably doing a press conference right now with like the third thing that he's going to unveil. But I think he started off right with, well, he started off unveiling this brand new haircut and style choice, which I know that's not what the live stream's about, but boy, oh boy, he looks different. I'm not sure who he's appealing to, but he definitely looks different. What are your thoughts on perms?
I mean, you do you. You do what makes you happy.
Well,
Um,
and I have always appreciated that about Zuckerberg is that, or Mark to his friends, is that there was this thing where early on in his career, like he had the same outfit for every day, so he removed that choice from his life to make just getting dressed simpler and more straightforward. And I quite like that idea. But we're going to probably talk about some stuff that we don't like about him, I guess. We got Sarah from London. Hello, nice to you join us. Cecilia from West Sussex. Joe Bailey from the better part of East Anglia. Unless you mean Norfolk, Joe Bailey, get the hell out of here, because we all know Norfolk is the pride of Anglia and Suffolk is just a little bit at the bottom that nobody cares about. So hello to everyone joining us. Greg is with us as well. The haircut.
Zuckerberg,
Zuckerberg's
not
haircut. I
yours.
was like, I had my haircut on Monday, Greg. Thank you for noticing. Siobhan is here as well. Thank you for joining us. Just in chat, let's take that first one. Let's leave the fashion aside. But the first one, he said that workplaces need more masculinity. I know that's not the topic of today's live stream, but I think there must be. Please do put in chat if there is anybody with any opinion on that, because really, I think that's the only really response is really. What do you think?
I mean, really, you're asking me? Okay, what do I think? What do I really think? I think he's trying to appeal to a certain sector of society for whom that resonates with, is what I really think is going on. I don't know how much of it is what he agrees now and is unfiltered now versus what was back when he was like, oh no, we've really got a problem with fake news and we're going to employ all of these people. We want to be part of news productions, whether that was what he thought. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I think he's just a fairly savvy business person or somebody who's easily swayed, one or the other. And he's just going with where the winds are going.
Yeah, totally. I mean, Sarah's just called you out. Is this really unfiltered? Like, I think there's a level. There will be a level of political filtering. We're not a political broadcast in any
Every
sense.
time I bring up politics, I love politics. I can talk about politics all the time, and every time I bring it up, people like go ugh and cringe inside. So that much is filtered, Sarah.
Maybe
Sorry.
maybe we'll do a live stream on politics at some point. But I certainly from myself, right, very uneducated in the political landscape. Emily is way more well versed in it. But if we think about, so I'm going to leave the masculinity on the side because I think it's just like ubiquitously like you're off your rocker. For my money, I'm just like, I don't think. Well, I think it's atypical of a leader, right? That isn't boots on the ground and seeing the day to day. Like it's quite easy to say that if you're not connected to the day to day of your organization. It's quite easy to say a lot of things. I can't say that I've seen that necessarily play out with anybody that I've worked with in the past 6 years, that there's not enough masculinity. And then you go into the whole vein of defining what it is. But let's get to the topic at hand. They killed off their DEI program.
Yeah. Well, that's what the headlines say. If you read a little bit beyond the headlines, some of it, yeah, they're definitely scrapping. Some of it, they've just kind of moved to different departments and called it different names, which makes me think it's a little bit of like I mean, what's the phrase? Like a dog whistle? Like, yeah, we're going to do this thing, but we're actually not really going to do it. So I do think there's a little element of that involved, but there's no denying that they had definitely cut some of it. Someone's at the front door.
As you work with me on a day-to-day basis, you know that someone is at the front door and an Amazon parcel is on its way. Oh, Jeff Bezos is someone we could talk about as well. Leave that again for another live stream. But I think you're absolutely right. So the conversations that we've had in the past, right, is that actually DEI as a function within an organization probably, no, it isn't the most effective way to create a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment as an employer, because it's bolting it on to your existing business strategy. It's like bring it in as an additional thing and go, oh, we'll just put this sticky plaster over this problem and hope that it fixes it. And really, unless someone in chat can give me a case where they've seen it work, ordinarily it's just this programmatic project-based work that isn't fixing the systemic culture and employee experience. What do you think? Am I onto something or not?
I think you're going to piss some people off. Um, I think that a lot of people exist and a lot of functions exist to prove their worth.
Hmm.
And that's not just an HR thing, it's definitely not just a DE&I thing. It's in lots of different places. This is where I should come up with a really snappy example, but my mind's gone blank. So leave that with me. Anyone's got any ideas, add them in the chat. Um, no, genuinely, I feel like L&D, I mean, that's HR as well, but oh yeah, big controversial topic, L&D is HR. A lot of places exist to prove their own worth and like kind of busybodies, I guess. And no, that's unfair. That's unfair to say, Emily. But you're gonna have to repeat the question again. This is excellent content here. I've like gone on a little whole little thing in my head.
Like like you say, the headline is Zuckerberg kills DEI initiative at Meta. That's the headline,
I
right?
think that's a good thing because DEI programs aren't achieving what they're set out to achieve.
So so the answer, because you highlighted that something that I haven't particularly read, that if you read between the lines, actually it's kind of this program that's been disseminated through the rest of the organization. It hasn't necessarily just been switched off.
It's not entirely clear because
Okay.
obviously they made the big press release and the big announcement, and they probably haven't even thought out all of the detail of how it's actually going to work, as is the case with a lot of these things. I mean, if that were the case, if it were going to come disseminated, that would be a good thing, in my opinion.
Mhm.
The way that DEI is going to work is if it becomes a business as usual. If we look at employee development, that was the example that I could think of that maybe was similar. Employee development doesn't work when it's run by a centralized
Mhm.
HR team. It works best when it's done with the managers, with the team leaders who work with that team on a day-to-day basis. And I think that DEI is the same. It's the same, really. Like you need to get it as part of everybody's role. Having said that, the challenge with if something is everybody's role, does it then become nobody's role?
Yeah, and this is what you talked about earlier, and I think Celia kind of raises a very similar point, that you've got to want to put in the work.
Mm.
And so, in the model that you've just described, and one that I'm fully bought into as well, but to Cecilia's point, it involves everyone willing to put in the work. If I look at a conversation I had about a year ago with a broadcaster, they had one person looking after all their DEI initiatives, and we're expected to spin up these programs that were going to change the way people think and behave with a budget of 10 to 20 grand. And you're like, really? Is that the thing that's going to create a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment in your organization? I don't think so. So it's about, it's that ownership within the organization, right? But how might you do that? Because everyone takes ownership for their jobs and what they're supposed to be doing in a job description. So is it as simple saying it's your job, and if you're not doing it, then you're not doing your job? But how do you measure that and all that kind of stuff, I guess?
I mean, it links exactly to what Sarah's just said, right? Like those opportunities have to be aligned to your business objectives, overarching business objectives. But then, especially when not even a bigger company, actually, I take that back. I was about to say, especially in a big company, but in any size company, your daily work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis has to link into the overall business objectives of the business. Otherwise, you start going off on a tangent and you feel less aligned to what's going on. You're kind of like, well, this doesn't make any sense, and your motivation slips, right? So if you can find a way to embed DEI into your organizational strategy, into your objectives, your KPIs, your key performance results, and then trickle that down into individuals, what they should be doing, and whether it depends on the business. Big ones that you're going to have performance goals and targets and those kind of things. Smaller ones, you might just have areas of responsibility. It depends how you're set up. But I think you need to find a way of embedding that in across everybody, and that's a big piece of work to do. It's easy to say, it's not easy to put into practice.
Totally. And I think Cecilia's got a correction. It doesn't work because you expect one initiative to magic away your issues. I think that's just, as you said, Emily, learning and development in those large organizations that's lucky or unlucky enough to have that department. It's kind of symptomatic of that. It's like hoping that this one thing is going to fix everything, where actually the system it sits within might not work. And it has to be data driven as well. Well, you are talking to the right person, not me, but Emily in that regard. We are both data driven or data informed. Yeah, I pulled myself back. But yeah, the data is really key. That the biggest bugbear I have with DEI, which it's a bit I'm going to have a bugbear with it, but is that most of it sits within two different areas of a business, right? The first one is if it has a DEI department or individual looking after it, who looks after those programmatic initiatives, it sits there. But then it tends to sit itself in terms of employer branding as well, and saying we want and recruitment. So probably two areas, but we want to attract the most diverse range of people from all walks of life and blah, 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 blah.
And then you get there and it's not diverse and it's shit. And it's really terrible. We've done a lot of work, or me especially, over the last few years with an organisation called the Creative Diversity Network, who are looking at increasing the number of disabled people working in the UK broadcast industries. And we looked at doing some training and some work around attracting disabled talent, which is a horrible saying in itself, but there we go, that's the wording. And you're like, but you get there and it's so unfair and awful that you don't want to be attracting people yet. You've got to sort it out for the people that you've got first.
Yeah. And I'll probably put a link in chat a little bit later, but that's when we went to Disrupt HR Birmingham, not last year, but the year before, so 2023 now, was that it is utterly pointless. It is utterly pointless trying to attract a diverse group of talent and then treating them all the same. That just it doesn't make sense. And then you translate that to a customer perspective, that also generally doesn't make sense as well. If you're trying to attract different types of customers and building this ubiquitous product or service that's going to attract loads of people, then it's probably not going to happen. And what do MailChimp call it? Clustomers, right? That you're just trying to bundle people together because it's easier. That's the main thing, right? Is you treat all employees the same because it's the easiest thing to do. And back in the day, with less technological advancements, it was harder. And this is why smaller organizations generally deal with it better, like our friends at Channel Assist. They're a smaller organization and they just offer this super bespoke approach to working with their people. And I think Alan was saying they're at 50 plus now, so they're managing to scale it as well. So they figured that out. But the issue comes when you're then trying to reverse engineer this into a large organization, born out of a society that treats all employees the same anyway. How do you then go from, let's say, a 10,000 person company, go, oh, all of a sudden we need to treat everybody differently, hyper personalization, all this kind of stuff? Like you've kind of got to retrofit it in. And so it seems like the answer is DEI department, DEI individual.
So bringing back a little bit to you, I'm pretty sure that the people we've got on our live stream are probably people bought into quite a lot of this already. Just a hunch. Maybe I'm wrong. What would you say to the owner of a business, a bigger business, not a 30-person business, about why you should treat your employees differently? Like why hyper personalization is the way to go?
Well, the problem is when you say that, your mind instantly goes, as a business owner, it's going to cost me more time, it's going to cost me
Hmm.
more money, and therefore my business is going to be more difficult to manage, and it's just going to get in the way. And this is why companies don't embrace it, especially those large organizations. It's too goddamn difficult. We're not going to do it. What we will do is pay lip service to it and put it highly visible in the right places, so it appears that we're doing something, but realistically we're not. Ultimately, though, what you need to be able to do, let's go back to that data informed approach, right? Is you need to be able to prove that it will make your business perform better. That's what you need to do. Is like, if you have a diverse group of people, actually you develop better things, you give better things to your customers, and your customer performs better. I don't believe anybody's ever really done that before, until we started like looking at data properly and kind of going, okay, if you treat broadly, what we do as Freeformers, if you treat people better, our belief is you treat people better, your company makes more money. Companies are there to make money. Companies aren't these houses that you kind of trying to create these lovely worlds within. Like, the company exists to make money, unfortunately, or fortunately, like whatever, right? So you kind of either can sit there and kind of go, we should have all these equal opportunities for everyone inside this organization, or you can just get down to brass tacks and say, well, the reason we do it is because we want the company to make more money. Now, do I believe that? Yes, I do. Do a business owners believe that? I don't know.
Some do, definitely some do. Like if you take a look at Atlassian and all the work that they do, they take a very, very data informed approach. And we're talking a bit wider than diversity here, but we're talking about remote working, which is the other thing that kind of springs to mind, because remote working works for some people, really doesn't work for other people. But at the moment, we seem to have this trend of people pushing their way in, well, not pushing their way, people, companies saying, right, you all have to do this, or you all have to do this, rather than having different things for different people. But then again, then how do you make sure that's fair, etc., etc.? I understand the challenges. Anyway, the point, Atlassian, they do a really, really data informed approach about how working remotely has done, it's improved all against their KPIs. They've got a fascinating report, and we can link it in the comments when I figure out how to do that, and find it for you. um so there are some companies. I've also talked to, I mean, it's like there's companies that do it on feel. We think that this is the right thing to do for our people, and we really care about our people. There are companies that do it on, I mean, maybe hard data the other way, the finances. Like, this is 100% what we're going. We're really pushing for a commercially sustainable. It's about profits. Sometimes shareholders, sometimes not. Sometimes your shareholders can be your employees, obviously, as well. But there's some people very focused on the finances, and then there are some people who are kind of in this middle part. And I think you say nobody's doing it, no one's looking at it yet. I disagree, but I think it's done in pockets, in very small pockets. And the thing is, there is no one size fits all. It does have to be a little bit tailored to the business. Even when we take our model, right, and we work with businesses, we still adapt it for their strategic needs and their business objectives.
It's really, I mean, it's super interesting. I want to come back to that point. I just want to acknowledge that we've had Joe in chat again. It's quite like just that subtle change in language, right? That it's a cost is actually an investment. And, let's beat around the bush. It's like, you expect a return on investment of hiring people. Like, Otherwise, you wouldn't hire them, right? It doesn't make sense. So I think the investment term is really good. And Cecilia says change is meant to be difficult, right? And this is the hardest thing. It's like when we talk about what we're talking about now and this systemic change, actually, this is societal change is what you're trying to achieve there. I'm not saying that's even more difficult, right? Is that this societal change that maybe is or isn't happening in pockets outside the world of work, you've then got to try and bring into the world of work. I think the biggest thing to do is if you sit there and ignore it, well, then you can't or doing the wrong thing.
Okay, but unfiltered here. If you're saying that you have to listen to what's going on outside the world of work, I mean, there definitely is a little bit of a rise of populism that I told you the politics in, a little bit of backlash against forward thinking. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but predominantly the main one is people feel that stuff is rubbish, stuff is not working, and so therefore nothing's working for them. Right. So should we be listening to that then from what you're saying?
Yeah. That's interesting. I don't know is the answer. I like yeah, that idea of popularism is quite dangerous. And look, broadly, there are some sectors. It's unfiltered, right? So
I've never seen you this stop for words
I
before.
know it's called unplugged, but not unfiltered. But we promised unfiltered at the top of it. But no, it's fine. Like when I did the trying to figure out what title was, it's like unplugged is unfiltered and all this kind. But anyway, law firms. Like when you look at traditional like law firms that are kind of predicated on hiring in their own image to be successful. Not necessarily nepotism directly, but nepotism is probably well, from what I've seen, both in maybe the consulting world and the legal world, is like there is a huge amount of nepotism in there.
Well, it's not necessarily nepotism, it's also just availability, right? An opportunity. You hear that something's happening, and that's not necessarily direct nepotism, but you hear what it's happening because you know somebody who works there, and then you go and you get it on merit, but you would never know that it was happening. You would never know about that opportunity if you hadn't heard about it.
Well, and this is the thing, is that the internet just means you're going to hear about it more. Like you could have 20 years ago. I mean, I was incredibly naive 20 years ago, probably still am, but like I just wasn't aware that these certain things would be happening because no one was talking about it. There wasn't a forum to talk about it. And now you don't even have to go to subreddits. You can just literally go to Glassdoor and Indeed and stuff like that and see this stuff playing out. And then that becomes really divisive because the amount of employers you hear that kind of goes, oh, well, they were just a disgruntled employee. And I'm like, well, you made them disgruntled. Like they felt as a result of their interaction with you that they needed to do that. Now it's a mutually financial services. Yes, 100%. It's a mutually beneficial relationship between employee and employer. And I think sometimes employers do forget that it's designed to be mutually beneficial. To what percentage varies within each organization, and that isn't just pounds, right? That's like the value of other stuff that sits around just the monetary gain. But where was I going? I was talking about you talked about the availability, right? Is that you just we didn't really know it was happening, and even if it wasn't shared far and wide, and now it is shared far and wide. It's like you can't get away with it anymore. I think
What
that
what's
post
it?
I tagged you in
What's it,
yesterday.
first of all? You're talking about different things. What do you mean
Sorry.
by it? You said it's happening, availability. We know it's happening.
Oh, we know companies are, the big thing is, right, is that discrimination law or anti-discrimination law, or like the law is there to support protected characteristics in the workplace to a certain degree. And so most organizations will do what they need to do to fulfill those requirements, and probably broadly again no more. So therefore, if I go back to the post I tagged you in this morning, wasn't it, that that graduate was discounted from a job, the feedback quite bluntly was, you're not from this particular group of universities, therefore we didn't put you forward. The interview was great, you're not from these particular group of universities. Now that is discrimination,
Yeah.
but not not illegal discrimination because it's not a protected characteristic. Therefore, it's a scummy thing to do, but you can probably get away with it. Now, just because you can get away with it doesn't mean you should do it. But that's the kind of thing I mean, right? Is that ordinarily, if that thing happened 20 years ago, it'd have really relied on word of mouth for that to be circulated. All it requires is someone to screenshot it, put it on LinkedIn. Now everybody knows your company is doing X.
A suitable amount of outrage gets picked up. I reckon I see that post, I think, will be picked up and picked up and picked up, even after the company deal with it. And I put in my comment, I really hope that they don't scapegoat the recruiter who said it. There's a chance that they were just, you know, uneducated or ill-informed, made a mistake, but it sounds like it was more indicative of a whole culture there. And this is where we bring it back to DEI, right? And why DEI is so important, has to be spread across everything, because that I, inclusion, like don't exclude people based on their education, based on their social class, based on anything.
So how do we fit? So, well, I think we know how to fix it, or at least start on the journey to fixing it.
I
Like,
think that's a big claim.
so
Go on then, Toby, tell us how we're going to fix it all.
how are we going to fix all of it? Well, look, at its heart, you've kind of got to reshape the way you do things. Like that's at the moment the way the processes and systems are designed for employee experience do not help you to deliver different experiences for different people. They actively create departments within HR, L&D, recruitment, whatever, that validate their own existence and therefore create things that benefit them. And so for employer brand or recruitment to include something about diversity, equity, inclusion in their proposition, in their strategy, in the way they do things is great. But if that is then not directly talking to the learning and development initiatives, the reward, the compensation, the benefits initiatives, the promotions, development, progression, if one hand over here is doing that and it's not directly linked to the other hand changing that thing, then what's the point? And it could also work the other way around, right? Is that you could be treating people amazingly inside the organization and not talking about it, which is in the case, right, of when we first started talking with Channel Sisters, like, wow, you're doing some incredible things, but not actually talking about them because we've not heard of it. Like, people should hear more about what you're doing. So it kind of works both ways, that figure out how to design it as a ubiquitous approach, and ultimately, applying customer experience design principles to employee experience design is our approach. Look, I'm not going to sit here and say it's the only approach, it's the way everyone should do it, but it'll certainly get you more gains than doing how HR and people, or whatever name you want to call it today, is doing things.
Agreed. I mean, obviously, of course, I agree.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be working together or on a live stream talking about it. But
well, I don't agree with everything you say. I think,
which is wise.
I think that one thing you just said really struck a chord with me, that people don't talk about the good work we do. And I think this is really, really a huge problem, particularly.
Not us.
Well, me,
Okay.
I sometimes struggle to talk about the good things that I've done.
Okay.
Like, because you're kind of taught, I don't know if it's a British thing, I don't know if it's a female thing, I don't know if it's you're a younger person, which I know I can't really claim to be anymore, but I definitely used to be, thing. You're taught, to be modest and humble and not to brag, right? And there's definitely some cultures where it's more acceptable. And I think it is a female thing, to be honest with you, particularly. And I think that's also why it's such an issue in HR in particular, that we don't shout about our initiatives. We don't shout about the amazing work we've done. We pride ourselves. Do you know the number of HR internal and external people I talk to who just say, I'm just really good at my job. I just get stuff done. I do it, and it's great, but you don't shout about it, and you're still seen as administrative, or HR doesn't have a top seat at the table. These are things that we've been talking about for ages, right? We've heard people say this over and over again, and one of the reasons is you're not, no offense, that great at saying what you've done, of like communicating yourself. And if we're going to link it back to politics again, exactly what the government's terrible at doing, our current government. Like, they sometimes do some good stuff, they sometimes do some questionable stuff. I do not agree with everything they do at all. but they don't put that spin on it. They don't tell the story about it. And I think stories are what makes the world go round. You look at how we're run by influencers and influence and stories and how they pick up, and it's all about headline, and you can like it or not like it, but it's the world we're in at the moment. Is if you can tell a story about what it is that you're doing, people are far more likely to know about it. And I think this has also been DEI's problem. People say that they don't see the point of it. It's seen as a cost, to come back to Joe's point earlier, whereas it could be an opportunity. If you can measure it, like Cecilia said, measure it and then tell that story, even more important, just as important as measuring it, that's what's going to help you succeed.
Yeah, one of the best things I've heard you say this week. Like that is just I have no response to that other than just like nodding. I think. Well, I have one thing then, so because it's me and I can't shut up, right? So there is that element that the rest of the world that are really good at doing the storytelling, putting spin, shouting about what they do really well, they're not going to shut up about it. They're not going to change and start being quieter. So the answer isn't to try and sit there with a quiet dignity and hope that someone
It's not.
sees and hears it. It's
It's
like you
not.
kind of got to fight fire with fire, because the other world is it's just never going to change. So and when I say fire, it's just using the metaphor, right, rather than actually, let's not use fire. That would be terrible. Sarah just commented as well about, companies that have such frameworks, recruiters won't work with them. And I think that's it, right? That social responsibility and ESG and social responsibility and all that kind of stuff, again, is that bolt on that we could go on, right? That companies that try and retrofit a purpose into their existence, and like, you ain't got no purpose in the world other than to make cash. Was it Sarah as well? Yeah, financial services, right? A bank, most banks, trying to put a purpose to what they do is just a thinly veiled attempt at trying to win favor via marketing, rather than them actually having a purpose. Now, if someone works for a bank or a financial services firm and can come and tell me, actually, this does have a purpose, and we'll tell you why, there will be some fintechs out there that are kind of
No,
doing that,
I
right?
disagree. I'm going to disagree with that. I
Okay.
think maybe the original reason that you were set up, but if you think of the banks and you think of the people who work there and how so many of them, so many individual people are so helpful, and they are there, they are genuinely there, many of them customer centric, they're there to help their people, right? Help their people, their customers who come in.
Oh, and that's why you shouldn't call your HR team a people team, because people is a very confusing term for everyone. But go on.
Customers, like, you think of, there's so many examples of especially banks going above and beyond, especially in a world of digital inclusion. Well, I don't know the latest figures, but it was something like 11 million a couple of years ago. UK adults did not have online access. And I think that a lot of banks, their purpose is I think it is to help the customers, because they're looking and more. Sorry, Sarah, I just picked up more hinged. I read that as more unhinged. And I was like, is that you, or is that us getting more unhinged? Um, yeah, so I think that banks do have a purpose, and I think that a lot of places have a purpose, but we can't also forget that there are other purposes to make money. And I don't think that should be a dirty word. Making money should not be a dirty word. You want to tie your other aspects into your making money part, I think. Because let's look, bank and customers. If you have higher customer satisfaction, you serve them better, you enable them to do what they're trying to do, they're more likely to stay with you, they're more likely to recommend you and say, you've done a great job. Like, let's not go into NPS, let's not go into NPS, but it does work, right? Like that word of mouth, like you said at the beginning.
Yes, and so I agree and disagree with you in the when it's like a direct customer relationship, when you have that opportunity to do that, it's great. I think certainly larger banks, right? They're so multifaceted in what they do, to have this ubiquitous. I've said that word too many times on this live stream already, but like when they try and have this ubiquitous purpose, there you go, I said it again. Like it can't possibly apply to every single facet of what that bank does. That's what gets me, right? It's like, actually, it's perfectly fine for retail banking in the example I think you're talking about, right? Is that can have one purpose and investment banking could have another. Like,
Sure,
but
it's
it's
also
very
investment
like
banking.
it's very, very rarely do I think there's going to be a purpose that brings those two things together.
My mum worked in investment banking for 40 years. And okay, my mum's a very conscientious person who cared about the people that she worked with, but it was
Mhm.
the same sort of thing. Like, you're doing the best thing for your customers. Yeah, your customers have got like millions and it's a very different lifestyle, but you're still trying to do the right thing for them. I don't know, like maybe
But my gripe is that customer centricity is not a purpose. Like,
no,
not
so you've got your North, so here we go on to North Star metrics, the other thing that I love. Um, if you have your North Star metric, which is the reason why your business is gonna succeed. So your North Star metric is the thing, the one number that you can point to. All your other targets and everything should align to it. It can't be revenue based, because if your North Star metric is increased revenue, you'll make stupid decisions to get
Mhm.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so it can't be revenue based. It has to be something that's always increasing. So with banking, you're maybe you're looking at number of customers, maybe you're looking at referrals, maybe you're looking at length of customer, whatever it is. But I think that can then be your purpose, right? Like, well, that can help frame your purpose, because ultimately that gives you more revenue.
So let's bring it back to the topic, because that's
Yeah, as I
really
say, we've
interesting.
wandered off a
We,
bit.
we but the so we're in a company, whether it's
Mm,
run by Mark Zuckerberg or whoever, doesn't really matter at this point. You've just got rid of the DEI initiative, all the team that was associated with that. You're hoping, in our world, that that is being disseminated through the rest of the organization, whether it's through managers, leaders, and other functions. Bit of a stretch, but we're hoping that,
mm.
that's happening. What would I don't know if this is going to be a really difficult question, so I'm going to apologize in advance if I'm just throwing you a massive curveball, which we might need to come back to at a later date. But like, to North Star metrics, right? What is the North Star metric for a DEI function? And therefore, how do you retain that North Star metric when it's then built into the rest of the organization?
I don't know. I really don't know. I'd be really interested to see if other people have a key. I don't think I could put one number on it right now, not being a DE&I thoroughbred through and through. I think you've got to look at the things that show that you're adding value. It's possibly something to do with belonging. It's possibly something to do with turnover, but turnover can't forever increase, so it can't be that. It's a really interesting question, one that I have to think about and we'll write a post about next week when we thought about it properly. But if anyone else has any ideas,
Because quite crudely, right? There's demographic data. Organizations will measure. Well, you're not really measuring You are measuring demographic data, but like, you just pick that up as part of the process, and it either is you can't change your demographic data unless you get rid and hire new people, or they move within demographics as well, which is entirely possible. So this kind of
I,
it's only affected at the beginning and the end of employment.
I have
No.
an answer for you. I have an answer
Oh,
for you, which is not related to anything you just said. Sorry. I was a little bit listening.
that's fine.
Um,
We might call it Freeformers Meanders, not rather than Unplugged. But I think it
no,
works.
you asked me what's the North Star metric for a DUI team. There is no such thing, because your North Star metric is your one metric that you have for your business, right? Everything everybody else does should be related to it. So the example that's in the growth levers book is because it's literally in my eyesight, because we talked about it the other
Hold
day.
it up. Let us see it so everyone can see the cover. Then when they
Oops.
Google it, they know which book they're after.
Oh, which way am I? This way.
This way.
Yeah, very nice and thin, very readable. Talking about how you can grow a business, but it starts off talking. I actually think it starts off about like kind of audience and problems you're solving for your audience. Then it gets onto how you're going to measure it. And so your North Star metric is, yeah, your one single figure for your business.
Mm,
And so like the example they use in there is a mindfulness app type thing, and they come around saying it's to do with number of minutes done every day,
mhm,
because that's a key figure for them, and that's how they know that people are going to renew, and renewals will then lead to more profit, etc. Where DE&I fits in is that in the design of it, making it, if you have a more inclusive and more diverse team, then you will make it more attractive to a more diverse um, audience, diverse user base. And that's how you're going to get more people using on a day-to-day basis. In your customer service team, if you've got people who can empathize, who can understand the situation that you're in, that is how you're going to get them again back on using the app, back on using, whatever your business model is, right? And then to help you reach your North Star metric. So it's like
mm.
it's a trickle down effect, but it's like we said, everything has to relate to your organizational objectives, and that's why DEI has to be within it. Um, so there's an answer. It's no hero figure. It's not an easy solution. Sorry.
No, and the more you talk about it, the more you kind of go, yeah, that makes sense. I think if we think about how we measure and do things, right, there's that ultimately, because there was a little bit you said, it's like, if I was traditional HR, right, you'd go, what's the demographic data of our employee base and how are we attracting and retaining those individuals? The thing that gives me the ick and is the sticking point, which isn't sustainable for a business, is the retention bit. Like, it's not about retention, because if people need to leave, people need to leave for various different reasons, right? What you're looking for at that moment in leave, are they a promoter or a detractor for you as an employer, right? So I think it's, and when I know we briefly skimmed on, like touched on EMPS or just NPS
Mm.
for your employees, that NPS is fine, but it's like, what are the indicators of, like, of being an advocate for a company, rather than just saying, are you an advocate for the company? Like, it's kind of very route one. And again, HR tends to, even L&D and all the facets, right, tend to be very straight on the straight and narrow. It's like, oh, we want to find out some information, so we will go and send out a survey asking that question to all the people, rather than thinking, how can you pick up more nuanced data that are indicators of what you're looking for, right? So if we think of EMPS at the moment of leaving, would they come back as an employee? Have they come back as an employee? Do they are they a customer? Do they recommend other friends and family go and work there? Not would they, but are they actually doing it? And if so, how many times have they done it, right? The actual performance data that demonstrates, that are indicators of being an advocate.
And I think if you want to tie that into DE&I, what you would then do is you'd look at the demographic data of your current employees and then compare that to your former employees and all of those things that you just said, all of those indicators. And then you say, okay, is there a difference across different demographics? Are we more inclusive to younger people? Are we
Yeah.
more whatever it may be?
And I think that's you end up with quite a strong, whether it's a business case or not, I'm not 100% sure, but it is a case for you being able to, well, you're demonstrating the impact of having a more potentially a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture in your organization, right? Then, to your point, then you can start looking at the performance of the organization and the amount of people you have and mutual lifetime value and all those things we talk about. But you can't really do that and attribute it to DEI until you figured out that base level of, this is the analytics, right? This is the analytics. That's such a poorly worded sentence. Apologies, YouTube caption, for doing that. Again, that also sounded pretty rubbish. So let's, because I think we should close out, right, is that we started talking about Zuckerberg. It's got rid of these. He wants a more masculine organization. He doesn't want to moderate anymore. That's the other thing we forgot to talk about. But crucially, he's killing off the DEI function. And our hope is that it's adopted across the organization as an initiative, and that's the reason for it being killed off.
Nah, pipe dream, Toby.
Well, I know it's a pipe dream, but I'm going to sit here and just kind of go, that's what you should be doing. That's what you should be. Mark Zuckerberg, for whatever reason you're watching.
Oh yeah, because that's gonna
Hello,
happen.
mate. How you
We're not
doing?
streaming on Facebook Live or whatever it's called. That's how much I use
No,
Facebook.
we aren't streaming on any Meta platforms, actually. Otherwise, we would have been taken down about 44 minutes ago. So I think it's interesting, though, because we in that world that probably isn't happening at Meta does happen in other organizations. Not a lot, but like you said, we've seen and heard of those stories. But then is it being measured as well, right? Because a lot of organizations will just do it because it's the right thing to do. And I
Mm.
will never argue that you people that do it because it's the right thing to do, because I agree.
But then you are at the whim of somebody who doesn't think it's the right thing to do. You get a new CEO or managing director, and suddenly it's not a priority anymore, and there is no case for it. So it goes.
Or your tyrannical leader has a change of heart and decides
Or there's a
to,
new president of the United States of America, and then his like bestie, who's like, I don't even know how to explain it, but like that's clearly what's happening, right? It's timed. He's just jumping on a bandwagon.
uh Cool. I think we closed that. In my head, I was like, "Damn it! I wish I'd like queued up the like YMCA as like the outro music." But that might have been too pointed. So this was our first live stream of 2025. We're going to be here at 3 p.m. UK time and morning time in the US. Hopefully for your commutes either to work or to pick up kids or whatever you do at this time on either side of the pond. Just a massive thank you to Joe, Sarah. Who else did we have in chat as well? We had Cecilia. We had loads of people in the comments. Thank you so much for contributing. We're going to be doing this every week. If you've got any ideas of things you'd like us to talk about, do drop those in chat as well. Also, if you're watching back on replay, hello to you. Yeah, and maybe at some point we'll bring in a guest or two and they can come and have a chat with as well, because there is actually room on this screen to have 3 people, because we're in 16:9 rather than 9:16, because we're millennials and not Gen Z, so we're not in portrait mode just yet, but we might get there. Emily, anything else to say in summary, because you're just about to say something?
You've just alienated our whole user base. They don't know what you're talking about. I don't really know what you're talking
I
about.
remember when the TV was square, not rectangle. Joe's just said thank you. I thought she was going to tell me about what TVs were like when she was young.
Toby, what happened to being inclusive?
Joe and me have this love-hate banter relationship that is crudely one way, but at some point Joe does know this. Joe is going to get ultimate revenge on me and take me down in such a massive way that I am genuinely scared of what 2025 brings for me and Joe, because I keep poking the bear and I think I'm about to get attacked at some point. Joe, I apologize.
Joe, we love you. Thank you for coming.
We love Joe. Joe is awesome. And Sarah, thank you so much for the little emoji smiley as well. Hope school pickup went well. Right, folks, we're dipping out of here. Thank you. Like I say, we'll be back here same time next week for Freeformers Unplugged.